Hello everyone, welcome to the 9th lecture of the course. This is the last lecture of module 2. In the previous lecture, we had talked about the knower, known, and the process of knowing. We saw that the self is the knower, the known is the human being, the existence, and the role of human being in the entire existence. And then we saw that the process of knowing is awakening to the activity of contemplation, understanding, and realization. In this lecture, we'll continue our discussion on right understanding and we'll see what would be the impact of right understanding on the human existence. So we are discussing about right understanding, that is knowing, and we talked about knower, known, and the process of knowing. Now in this module 2, we have been trying to explore into the right understanding in detail. And in essence, we saw that right understanding, that is knowing, is to see the reality as it is. And we saw that right understanding, that is knowing, is to see the reality as it is and its completeness. Completeness because if you just try to understand the human being and leave out the rest of nature, or you try to study the nature and leave out the human being, ultimately you are not going to see the reality in completeness. So we need to know the whole existence as it is and the role of the human being in the entire existence. We saw that it is the self, that is I, which is the knower, and the whole existence is to be known. That includes the human being, the rest of nature, and the submergence of the entire nature in the space, and also the role of human being in this entire nature. As the process of knowing, we had talked about these three activities: contemplation, understanding, and realization. And we saw that ultimately the process of knowing is to awakening to these three activities. And we saw that the content of contemplation is natural characteristic. The content of understanding is the innate harmony, and the content of realization is the coexistence. We saw that the content of contemplation is the natural characteristic, that is to see the relationship of one unit with another unit. The unit is either material or consciousness. We saw that the content of understanding is the innateness, and that essentially means to be able to see the harmony, the innate harmony in every unit. And the content of realization is the coexistence, that is the submergence of nature in space. We looked into the process of understanding in some detail in the last session. And in this lecture, we'll look into some of the realities to be known. So when we say what is to be known, it is the entire existence, and that will mean knowing the human being. So we need to ensure knowledge of human being. We need to ensure knowledge of existence and knowledge of human conduct, that is the role of human being in this entire existence. So these are the three things to be known, and the knowing starts with human being, as we had mentioned in the previous lecture. The more clarity I have about the human being, I am able to get the clarity about the rest of nature also. Otherwise, the assumption that I carry for the human being, they get superposed upon the rest of nature and so on. So we'll try to know the human being, we'll try to know the existence, and we'll also try to know the human conduct, that is the role of human being in this existence. Now talking about the reality to be known, these are the three things to be known, and they are given in a proper sequence. So through the process of knowing described above, we can have the knowledge of human being, we can have the knowledge of existence, and we can have the knowledge of human conduct. So just try to make out for yourself, is there something else to be known, or this covers entire thing? This is one thing. Second thing, by looking at these three things to be known, we are saying that the entire existence can be known. So everything can be known. Now, as we discussed earlier, that we cannot gather information about the form and property of every unit in the nature, but certainly we can have the knowing of the natural characteristic, the innateness, and the submergence, that is coexistence. So one takeaway from this lecture would be that you are able to see that yes, the entire existence can be known. And the title of the course is also Understanding the Human Being and Nature Comprehensively. So we'll try to comprehensively know the human being, the existence, and the role of human being in this entire existence. I hope you are able to see this. So these are the three realities to be known. So we'll investigate into this detail of knowledge of human being in module 3. Regarding knowledge of existence, we'll investigate in module 4 in detail. And when it comes to knowledge of human conduct, partly we'll try to investigate in module 3, and then again we'll discuss about this in module 5. So this is the way the next 3 modules are structured. So what would be the impact of right understanding on the human existence? So in essence, we'll see how right understanding reflects in the overall activities of the self, and what would be the state of the self with right understanding in completeness. Similarly, how it reflects in the human conduct, in the expression, in your behavior, work, participation in the larger order. So a detailed discussion will be done after investigating into the human being, particularly the self, that we are going to do in module 3. And we'll also investigate into the existence in module 4. And after having done that, we'll try to investigate deeper and further in the next module. Now, this is the diagram of the self that we'll keep on bringing to you time and again. Now, if you look at the imagination on the basis of realization, understanding, and contemplation, so it will look like this. And we had talked about these activities earlier also. So you can see in this diagram that in the leftmost column, what is written on the top is the power. So we have the power to desire, think, and expect. In the next column is written the dynamic activities. So authentication, determination, imaging, analyzing, selecting. These are the dynamic activities. The state activities are realization, understanding, contemplation, comparing, and testing. On the right hand side, you can see what is the content of all these activities with right understanding ensured. So if you see what is to be realized is the coexistence, what is to be understood is the harmony in the nature, and what is to be contemplated upon is the participation in the larger order, that is the relationship. So if you look at comparing, your comparing is now guided by the knowing of coexistence, harmony, and participation in the larger order. So these guide your senses, health, and profit. Similarly, your testing is also guided now. So coexistence, harmony, and relationship guide your sensation now. So imagination on the basis of these 3, that is realization, understanding, and contemplation, in brief would be that my imagination is now completely guided by right understanding, that is knowing. No longer my imagination is dictated by any kind of preconditionings. Now, this is a very important statement. The more I am having the right understanding, my preconditionings get done away with. They get evaluated. They get set right. So if I'm having some preconditioning, which is in line with my natural acceptance, it becomes a part of my imagination, which is now guided by right understanding. And if I have some conditioning, which is otherwise, so it gets removed, it gets replaced. For example, if there is some assumption about opposition in relationship, it gets replaced by relationship. Similarly, if there is some assumption about disharmony, it gets replaced by understanding of harmony. And similarly, the assumption about struggle gets replaced by the feeling of coexistence. So this is the way that desire gets impacted with right understanding. Similarly, in comparing, we have the humane basis of comparing, which is the coexistence, harmony, and relationship. Now, on this basis only, we analyze whatever we do at the level of thought. And similarly, now selecting and testing are also guided. And the same gets impacted in our behavior, work, and participation in the larger order. With right understanding, my behavior with human being is mutually fulfilling. My work with the rest of nature is mutually fulfilling. And my participation in the larger order is also mutually fulfilling. So this is the state of imagination with right understanding, that is realization, understanding, and contemplation. Now, if you look at the full expression of human conduct, so I am able to realize coexistence. I am able to realize the submergence of nature in space. And this is the realization within. So you can see on the top is written space. And with realization, I'm able to see how the entire nature is energized, self-organized, and participating, being in space. Now, on this basis of realization, my understanding gets complete, my contemplation gets complete, my imagination gets harmonious. The same percolates into my behavior, work, and participation in the larger order. Now, the competence to ensure mutual happiness with other human beings gradually leads to undivided society. So my role in the society is now very much definite. It is always in terms of ensuring mutual happiness. Similarly, the work that I'm doing with the rest of nature, it ensures mutual prosperity in by mutual interactions. And if you look at the expression outside, it ultimately leads to participation in the larger order, leading to the fulfillment of human goal, and that goes up to universal human order. And this forms the tradition generation by generation. Now, in this process of knowing, we'll see that presently we might be active only in these three activities, that is desire, thought, and expectation. So we are operating at the level of imaging, analyzing, comparing, selecting, and testing. And this has to be ensured. This is something due, isn't it? So the more I work for activating block B1, if I try to go up, I try to activate these activities, isn't it? These activities on the bottom get set in order, they get harmonious. And the same thing goes into my expression here. So on one hand, I am moving up within me, I am moving to the higher activities. And in my expression, I am gradually moving towards universal human order and human tradition. Now, these are two ends, if you see. So this is the expression outside that we can see here. And this is what I am accomplishing within. So on one hand, I am moving towards realization. And on the other hand, I am moving towards this human tradition, isn't it? And this is what is desirable. Are you able to see this? Is this desirable or not? Try to see whether this is going to happen, whether this is something desirable. So what I understand within has to reflect in my expression. The more I am able to ensure the knowing within me, the more it gets expressed in my mutual interactions, be it a human being or the rest of nature. So this is another way to evaluate. If I'm able to participate in the human tradition, if I'm able to participate in mutual happiness, mutual prosperity every moment, then only I can say that I'm moving towards right understanding also. And the more I work for right understanding, it gets very naturally expressed in my behavior, work, and participation in the larger order, isn't it? Try to make it out. Try to explore and verify this part. Now we can place this development of the self in the discussion of the entire existence. So existence is there as coexistence. The units are submerged in space. And we had talked about this earlier also, that the units are limited in size. They are an activity within themselves. They are self-organized, energized, recognizing the relationship and fulfilling it. But if you look at the space, it is unlimited. It is no activity. The self-organization is available. Energy is there in equilibrium and it is transparent. We'll talk about space in detail in module 4. The units are of two kinds, material and consciousness. And we can see that it is the consciousness unit that has to develop. Now, the self is here. And we could see that ultimately the development has to take place in the self. And it is not cyclic, it is acyclic. Okay, once I develop, I remain in that state of development. It's not that I'm going to go back to my previous state. But if you look at the rest of nature, if you look at the units of physical order or bio order, okay, there's a cyclicality involved here. The plant grows from the seed, becomes a tree, and goes back to the soil, isn't it? We make long, tall structures, and maybe they go back to the soil after some time. So there is a cyclicality involved here. And you can see that there is composition and decomposition taking place here. But that is not the case with the self. There is no composition or decomposition here. It's only development, which is acyclic. So in the entire existence, it is only the self which has to develop. The self with lack of development, with lack of knowing, right understanding, with lack of development of the activities of contemplation, understanding, and realization, is not in a happy state. It is unhappy. It does not have the feeling of prosperity, feeling deprived. But the rest of the nature is already in order. So one thing to appreciate is that the entire existence is already in coexistence. The units in the nature are already in order. It's only the self which has to get into order. And that can happen only when we go into this process of knowing. And we also see that this has to happen in the self by the self. The body merely being an instrument in the process, this has to happen in the self by the self. I hope you are able to see this. Now, here is the picture of entire existence there in front of you. And you can see that the units of physical order, bio order, animal order are already in harmony. None of them have the potential to know. The self in the human order has the potential to know. And unless this potential to know is utilized, unless we are able to ensure the knowing in completeness, we are not in a state which is naturally acceptable to us, in which you would like to continue. And we are not at peace. We are not in state of harmony. And that's how we have to work to develop the self. So this transformation is required, and this transformation is from animal consciousness to human consciousness. Now you can see that there are two diagrams here. One is the diagram of the self with all the activities in block B1 activated. And here's the diagram of the self, which shows that the activities are not yet activated in block B1. One is only working in the lower block, that is block B2, and only the activities of imaging, analyzing, comparing, selecting, and testing are active. And that's how we can say that the self living with animal consciousness is ultimately leading to inhuman society. And an inhuman society is marked by this: having wrong goals, wrong assumptions, obsession for consumption, obsession for profit, for sensual pleasure, leading to terrorism and war in the society, and resource depletion and pollution in the nature. So this is the state of inhuman society, isn't it? Now this inhuman self, that is the self lacking knowing, leads to inhuman society, and the society is again not allowing the development of the self in the next generation, and this goes on and on, generation by generation, and this becomes a wrong tradition. But if we have to come out of this state, then the only way is to ensure the process of knowing, and in this process the self develops. When the self develops, it is able to participate in a human society, fulfilling all the human goals, that is right understanding and right feeling in the individual. So we can see that a self with right understanding is able to participate in the human society, is able to fulfill the human goal. There are 4 human goals which are mentioned here, that is right understanding, right feeling in every individual, prosperity in every family, fearlessness, that is trust in the society, and coexistence in the nature. Now the self which is developed, the self which has the knowing, will ensure a harmonious society, and this harmonious society will assist in the development of the self for the next generation, and this will go generation by generation. So this is the kind of society that we want to be in, isn't it? And this is the process that we'd like to have ensured. So this is the transformation that is required. Presently we might be here and we want to go to this state, and we have to move in this direction, and then only we can say that we are progressing as a society. Then only we can say that we are progressing as an individual. So in all our policies that we are making for the society, in our plans and programs, we have to see whether this kind of transformation is taking place or not, or we are only working to add to the physical facilities. Because ultimately, if the physical facility is at the core, then this is what is going to result: humans living with inhuman conduct, okay, adding to the domination, exploitation, fear in the society, and then exploiting the rest of nature also. So this is something which is to be evaluated. This is something to be made out in all our programs and plans and strategies. Now, the basic program that is required for this kind of development is the human education. So the human education ensures personal transformation, and this personal transformation ensures societal transformation. Now, many times we do talk about the society to be transformed, but we do have to understand that unless the human being is transformed, the society is not going to get transformed. Because human beings make the society. To transform the society, we basically have to work at the level of human being, and for that we need to have a human education. We need to have an education in place which focuses on the development of the self. So just try to make out, can we make this the core of our education, this development of the self, or we have to keep it on the side? Now this is something to be thought about very seriously. So if you look at the human society, it has these human goals, that is right understanding and right feeling in every individual, ensuring happiness, prosperity in every family, fearlessness, that is trust in the society, and coexistence, that is mutual fulfillment in the nature and existence. And when we have the family based society, that is families are living together having a common goal, then this can be achieved. But when we do not have this kind of vision, this kind of program in a society, then what results is inhuman society, and that turns into a crowd or a battlefield. And these are the results of having this kind of society. So a common assumption that is there in the society, which is prevalent today, is that money is everything. And these kinds of false notions can rule the imagination of the people living in the society. Similarly, people are trying to accumulate as much as possible by whatever means possible. And that is also somewhat leading to the disorder, disharmony in the society. If you look at the society, we see that there is domination. If you look at the society, we see that there is domination, exploitation, fear. And when you look at our interaction with the nature, we are somewhat trying to master over the nature, exploiting the nature. Now, if you go by this, then of course it is going to result into multifarious problems. Now, this kind of assumption that money is everything has somewhat become prevalent in every individual. Every family is trying to accumulate as much as possible by whatever means possible. But of course, this cannot be there for every family. So only few families may be able to do this. In the society, we can see domination, fear. And in the nature, we can of course see the masculine exploitation. And this has resulted into various kinds of obsession, like obsession for consumption, profit, and sensual pleasure. In the society, we can see that there is a lot of terrorism, there is a lot of possibility for wars. And now that the nations have atomic weapons, nuclear weapons, so even this is being questioned whether this earth is going to exist or not. Of course, the earth will exist, but it may exist. So this is also being questioned whether this earth is going to be a livable place in the future or not. And in the nature, we can see that there are problems of resource depletion, pollution. And this is there when individuals are having different or opposing goals. When the family is not at the base, people are living to fulfill their individual goals and which are not common to other individuals, then of course this kind of society is going to result. And there is the requirement for ensuring this transformation from animal consciousness to human consciousness, from inhuman society to human society. This is something that we have been reiterating, talking about time and again. So you have to think about this. This is a very serious concern. So you have to think about this, whether we are going to continue with this kind of a state or we are going to work for this. And then who is responsible? Who is going to own the responsibility for this? So if you look at yourself, you have to start with yourself, isn't it? If there is not much provision in the society to fulfill the human goal, we have to create that provision. The good thing is that every human being naturally has the acceptance for this human goal. Only because of the conditionings or dependence on sensation for happiness, the society may be moving in the wrong direction. But ultimately, if we are able to ensure this kind of vision in our education, then certainly we can transform the society from the current state to the desired state. So think about this. This is something worth pondering upon, worth consideration. So now we have homework for you. So you can see that human being is an integral part of this nature and existence with a specific role to play. So our role is very much specific, definite, and this is something common to every human being. Units of the other orders, physical, bio, or animal, have a predefined participation and they are in harmony performing that participation. Only in the case of the human being, it has to understand and play its existential role to be able to be in harmony and therefore in a state of happiness. And you and me are one of them. So as an assignment, you have to write down the impact of right understanding on human being. And we'll study all this in detail in the lectures to come. So as the lectures progress, you'll be having a better clarity of your role in the entire existence. And in the fifth module, of course, we are going to talk about human conduct. So in this lecture, we talked about right understanding. We continued our discussion that we were having in the previous lecture, and we had a look at the impact of right understanding on the imagination in the self and in living. And we saw that there are two ends to be met. Within the self, I have to reach the state of realization. And in my expression, I have to reach the state of universal human order, generation by generation, something that can be termed as human tradition. So this is all for the lecture today. Thank you.